Hi, my name is Faith Cheltenham, and I'm Bruin Pride. Many of us who helped start that group, the Queer Alliance, were in it for amazing reasons of diversity, inclusion, and so, you know, it's pretty interesting. I came to things through, you know, different kind of channels to start that. I started out the Student Welfare Commission, which was it's an on-campus entity that does a lot of, you know, health-related services. I was very interested in sexual violence prevention, having been a survivor of multiple sexual assaults, like so many bi, pan, fluid, queer, and folks who cross into the bi-spectrum experience. So I was very interested in that, and I was doing Clothesline Project and Take Back the Night, and I was also kind of identifying myself at that time as a lesbian. And, you know, was trying to say, like, yeah, I was like, I love women, for sure. Like, people are like, well, that's lesbian. I'm like, okay. Like, in my home, you know, words like gay and lesbian were, you know, not bandied about unless we were talking about trying to eliminate that, right? And so the word bisexual was certainly never brought up as a group of people who I had a common experience with, of being able to say, oh, I've liked people who have gender, who don't, who men, women, androgynous. This whole thing is this giant world of bisexuality, and didn't know anything about it. So I was lucky to kind of segue from sexual assault stuff to going to the campus, to the dorm rep, where I met my first girlfriend. And, you know, she was a CSO, one of the campus police officers, so I would go on with her on her rounds, and we'd make out in the sculpture garden. Like, oh, you know. So, and, but unfortunately for me, to a certain extent, we ended up breaking up over my attraction to men that she was very worried about, right? She was very concerned that it was still lingering and it hadn't disappeared. And then we also saw The Matrix, and she just hated The Matrix. We saw it on campus and at an early screening, and she was just like, what a stupid movie. And I was like, we're gonna break up. There's nothing for us. There's nothing left. Like, you can't identify with me, you don't love me, and you don't like The Matrix. We have nothing in common. Why are we even together? So it is funny, but like, you know, so it was all happening for me on campus, though, right? And I remember this moment where I don't know what I was doing, but somebody marched up to me, and it was Elias Enciso, who from La Familia, who was also serving at that time as a USAC internal vice president, right? So the VP of the student body, who was also a Latino gay man, who was radical, who was, you know, fighting for rights, constantly speaking, never letting anything go. And he walks up to me and says, what are you doing right now? And I'm like, I'm just hanging out, you know. It's like, you should be coming to our meetings. And I'm like, what? And it was a La Familia meeting. And I was like, but I'm not Latino. And he was like, but where are the black people? And I was like, I don't know, like, it's a good point, right? So I hadn't felt comfortable kind of going to these spaces, especially after breaking up with my first girlfriend, who, you know, definitely, you know, spread the word a little bit. Hey, this is a fake gay, right? She's not a real lesbian. She wears, you know, softball hats and stuff, but she's not one of us, right? So I felt kind of like excluded, and so many bi people have had that experience of feeling excluded from the one, like, entry to social circle that they had, because, like, people identify that they're not 100% gay, right? Well, you're not really one of us. Like, we'll sleep with you, but... So, it was a relief to be welcomed into LAFA, and especially as a black person, right? And for them to be like, you've got some good ideas, like, do you want to help out? We can add on and, like, kind of incubate a new organization, which went on to be called BlaQue. And that was also from random meeting of another black LGBT person, Marco Alakent, who was, I literally was like at Northern Lights or something eating a sandwich, and he like comes up to me like, we need to talk. And I'm like, what? And we started talking about, let's start this group up, and why isn't it there, and where's the space for black voices who are LGBT, as well as what's the history, right? And I knew James Baldwin, I knew a couple other names, but I didn't necessarily know all the names. You know, I didn't know how rich our history was. And so that became a real just journey for me. Dr. Mimi Wong was here doing Fluid, It was a support group out of one of the women's studies offices, I think in Kinsey or something. And then I helped create it as a student group called Fluid. Years later, we developed that, and it's still long running, and it still has lots of, bi-pan focus, pan-bi focus. I started doing a workshop here called The Most Revolutionary. It was first given at UCLA as part of a Black with a Q meeting, and it was focused on African homosexualities, and also kind of letting people know that the Black Power movement, including Black Panthers, had been very inclusive of queer folks, right? So much so that Huey Newton, a co-founder of the Black Panther Party in 1971, wrote a letter of support for the Gay Liberation Front, right? Saying, listen, don't say these guys aren't, revolutionary. In fact, they might even be the most revolutionary. So we have to work on our oppression, right? And understand that we as Black people can oppress our own, and that there may be white gays or maybe Black gays. I mean, just constant good stuff in this letter. And so it was really exciting to be able to put all these pieces of myself together throughout the, the different stuff. But a lot of the reasons why we developed the groups we did, the Queer Alliance in particular, was because of the funding issues that we had at UCLA, where we saw fraternities and sororities and Panalytic getting a lot of support. We saw lots of different organizations getting tons of money, people having retreats, people having access to any number of things. Let's have an event at Royce Hall. Fantastic, it's a culture night. Well, we want a culture night too, right? So that was some of the stuff that we did when I was here with the Queer Alliance, was develop Queer Culture Night, right? What does that look like? Or the other side of the rainbow, which we call Toaster, which is like this, that was actually my name for it. Like, I came up with that myself. It's like, I love branding, which has served me well later in life, but that was always my thing, was like, how can we make it cute? It's gotta be cute and sparkly. So, but yeah, I mean, it was kind of this big roller coaster of doing a lot of different groups and saying to everybody, like, we want your voice. Going to organizations, like there was a group called Mahu, which I know has changed its name, but it was for Asian Pacific Islanders, and going to their meeting, they're like, are you something? Are you Filipino? So many people that think of that. I'm like, no, I'm just here, like, supporting, just, want to hear your stories, but also let you know, like, there's all these different opportunities out there. There's 10%, which is now outright, or I think, right, the LGBT news magazine. There's all these different venues for our voices. And a lot of those venues weren't necessarily all aware of each other. So that was a lot of, I think, what we tried to accomplish with building out these different groups, And also we were having issues with particular coalitions on campus. Folks devoted to bringing back affirmative action, folks devoted to empowering students who were having difficulties over, let's say, Israel and Muslim Student Association kind of situations. And so having an organization like Mishpaha for Jewish identified LGBT students was like a huge deal for us, because it allowed pieces of multiple progressive movements to come together in a space and say, here's what my problem is, here's what I'm having an issue on. And that's one voice within the LGBT space, but it's also amplifying the discussion, right? And it's allowing folks from a Jewish LGBT background to also be educated on issues from, let's say, a Muslim or different cultural background, right, which they just haven't had. And that was a surprise for people. We clashed on that repeatedly, especially when it came to, let's say, wealthy white guys, which then became a theme in my life. I'm just kidding. But like, just kind of like, wow, like there's folks who really don't see this, and they're like, I don't want to talk about that, I just want to have fun. I want to celebrate our queerness. I want to be awesome and just celebrate and go to WeHo and have fun. And so that was something we saw early, I saw early here at UCLA, that then I continue to see in LGBT activism. So Bruin Pride is bisexual, right? Just like me and so many of the folks who came through UCLA who acknowledged their shared experience here. And I don't know, fell in love for the first time with themselves, just like me, right on this campus. right? And got to feel loved and appreciated and supported right here at this center, right here on this campus.